Hello and welcome back to Indistinct Chatter. I'm Eliza and I am so glad you're here. Grab a snack, get comfy. Today's episode might be a little long, but in a good way. When you sit down and you watch a TV show, but then it's so good, you stay up till 2 a.m. watching the entire series. It might be that long, maybe. We are talking about the U.S. Forest Service today. And before you roll your eyes and think, okay, but why do I care about trees? I promise you by the end of this episode, you are going to care. Whether you're into hiking, maybe you're the type of person that won't even go outside unless there's a brunch involved. Maybe you're a business person, a hunter, a camper, whatever you are, I want you to care, okay? You should care. But first, let's talk about what's happening in the news. Let's catch up on this week's top headlines. First up, the US Iran war situation. If you haven't been following this closely, let me give you the quick recap version that I've been touching base on lately. So, the US and Israel started military operations against Iran at the end of February, a 5-week war, thousands of people killed, massive damage across Iran and Lebanon, oil shipping severely disrupted. On April 7th, which was a deeply dramatic day, Trump literally posted on social media that a whole civilization will die tonight. A 2-week ceasefire got brokered at the last minute by Pakistan. China helped nudge it through. Iran's new leadership agreed to the ceasefire. Everyone could take a breath for about 5 days or so. Then over the weekend, the US and Iran met face to face in Islamabad for peace talks, the highest level direct conversation between the two countries since 1979. They talked for a cool, casual 21 hours and then left without a deal. This morning, as in April 13th, when I'm recording, the U.S. military officially began a blockade of Iranian ports through the Strait of Hormuz. For those who don't know, the Strait of Hormuz is basically the world's most critical oil choke point. Around 20% of the global oil supply moves through it. So when that gets backed up, oil prices spike, and that trickles down to your gas, your groceries, your Amazon delivery, everything, really. Oil is already up over 30% since the war started in February. Iran is threatening to retaliate against other ports in the region. If you've been listening, this isn't new, but it's still very tense and it's worth reminding you. There are apparently still ongoing communications between the US and Iran, so it's not fully closed, but we are watching a live geopolitical situation unfold in real time this week. And then there's the Pope. So we have a new Pope, as you know, Pope Leo XIV, who happens to be American, Midwestern, and he and our president are currently in a very public feud. Yes, you heard that right, folks. The Pope and our president are beefing. Is this a plot for a bad comedy? Is this real? Or actually, maybe this will be the plot line for season 3 of Beef. The Pope has been vocal about the Iran war, calling Trump's rhetoric and threats against the Iranian people truly unacceptable. Trump responded by going on Fox News, saying he's not a fan of Pope Leo. The Pope responded by saying he has no fear of the Trump administration. Oh, and there was also a post on Trump's social media that depicted him as Jesus. It was briefly up and then it was taken down. He said it was meant to show him as a doctor. Why? I don't know, but okay. Now, some actually good news to break up the doom scrolling and for you to catch your breath after screaming at the news. It involves space, but I am not spiraling. I promise. This is the kind of space exploration that I like to hear about. So, if you listened to my episode a couple weeks ago, you know I talked about the Artemis II launch. The first humans have gone beyond low Earth orbit in over 50 years. Well, they are back. Friday night, April 10th, the crew splashed down safely in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of San Diego. All 4 of them safe, in high spirits, taking selfies, all around good times, good vibes. And the records they broke on this trip are pretty cool. The crew, Commander Reed Wiseman, pilot Victor Glover, and mission specialists Christina Cook and Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen, traveled 252,756 miles from Earth. That's farther than any human has ever been. They beat the record previously held by the Apollo 13 crew, which is bittersweet because that crew set that record under extremely not ideal circumstances. But even more history was made. So Victor Glover became the first Black astronaut to travel around the moon. Christina Koch became the first woman. Jeremy Hansen became the first non American. Until now, every single human who had gone on a lunar mission was a white American man. That's it. But that all changes now, baby. Ah, you love to see it. They also witnessed a solar eclipse from space, the moon blocking the sun, seen from the other side, and watched meteorite strikes on the lunar surface in real time, which apparently had scientists on Earth absolutely losing their minds. Mine too, because that scares me. And they got images of the far side of the moon that humans had literally never seen with their own eyes before. And I mean, go look online if you haven't seen the photos. They're so beautiful. And I mean, we all learned something new. The moon is not made out of cheese. When the crew landed back in Houston the next day, Commander Wiseman said on stage, "We are bonded forever, and no one down here is ever going to know what the four of us just went through." He was visibly emotional. It was so sweet. I love seeing the images of them hugging in zero gravity. I just think that all around this seems like a really great crew. NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman called it the greatest adventure in human history. And I mean, hard to argue. I feel like this really brought a lot of Americans together, and that's something that we've needed, you know? And speaking of technology taking up space, eh, literally and figuratively, let's talk about data centers. This whole situation has been ruminating for a while, but it really hit a tipping point this week. Maine is on the verge of becoming the first state in the country to pass a temporary ban on new large scale AI data centers. Both chambers of the state legislature passed the bill, which would freeze construction of any data center using 20 megawatts or more of power until November of 2027. That's enough electricity to power roughly 15,000 homes, by the way. And why? Why are they doing this, you might ask? Well, because people's electricity bills are going through the roof. Maine already has some of the highest residential electric rates in the country, up nearly 60% since 2021. And residents are watching tech companies swoop in and build massive facilities that suck up enormous amounts of power and water, generate a shit ton of noise, and mostly offer only short term construction jobs, but not much long term community benefit. Rep. Amy Roeder said, "We are getting killed by electric prices. To put a data center in the middle of this just feels irresponsible. I love the idea of just hitting pause." And I think a lot of her constituents were probably thinking the same thing. Maine isn't alone. At least 11 other states have introduced similar moratorium bills this session: Virginia, New York, Georgia, Michigan, Oklahoma, and many more. Bernie Sanders and AOC introduced a federal version. The bill still needs to get past the governor, who has some concerns, but the momentum is real. And this is one of those issues where you have people on both sides who do kind of have a point. Tech companies say that data centers bring jobs and economic development. Critics say the costs get passed to regular people who are already struggling with their bills. And underneath all of it is a much bigger question about who's bearing the cost of this AI boom and whether anyone asked your community before they started building in the first place. And then something that you may have been circulating in your feeds this week, or at least I know I sure did: headlines and posts about Trump dismantling the US Forest Service. Maybe you scrolled past it. Maybe you stopped and thought, wait, is that even real? Maybe you're like me, who sent a bunch of texts to people simply saying, what the fuck? Maybe you don't even know what the Forest Service is exactly and or why anyone's upset. All of that is valid, and that's exactly what we're talking about today, because this story, it's bigger than the headlines are making it seem. And it's been building for quite a while, so let's get into it. On March 31st of this year, the Trump administration announced that it's moving the U.S. Forest Service headquarters, which has been in Washington, D.C. since 1905, to Salt Lake City, Utah. And that's not all. They are also shutting down 57 of 77 research facilities, closing 9 regional offices across 31 states, replacing the regional structure with 15 state directors, and proposing to cut the agency staffing by 26%. Now, they're framing this as a sweeping restructure to bring the agency closer to the forests it serves, which on the surface, I get. A lot of national forest land is out west. Fine, fair. But critics are calling it something else entirely. And the more that you dig into the history, which we're about to do, the more all of this sounds really familiar. It's kind of a loop, you know? Because this isn't the first time that someone has tried to gut the agency. And honestly, it does matter who wins this fight. So let me take you back to 1865. The Civil War just ended. The country is kind of a mess, obviously. And there's this guy, Franklin Benjamin Huff. He goes by Franklin. He's a doctor from upstate New York, grew up near the Adirondacks, which is obviously absolutely stunning. I've never been, but I'd like to. I also have no idea if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And he is, by all accounts, a classic overachiever. He's a doctor, a historian, a botanist, a census statistician. He started a periodical about forestry. He discovered a mineral that they literally named after him. The man had range, okay? So Franklin's out there, he's doing his job, he's overseeing the 1865 New York State Census. And while he's looking at the data, he notices something. Timber's disappearing fast. Like the numbers are telling a story, and the story is we are cutting down trees faster than they can grow back. And if we keep going at this rate, we're going to have a serious problem. And here's the thing, this is the 1860s. Nobody's really thinking about deforestation as a crisis. This is the Industrial Revolution. Trees are resources. You cut them down, you build things, you move on. That's just what you do. But Franklin is looking at the same numbers everyone else has access to, and he's like, hey, hold up. Wait a second. This isn't sustainable. He spends years collecting data from all over the US, even from countries in Europe that have already dealt with this problem. And in 1873, he presents a paper to the American Association for the Advancement of Science. The paper is called On the Duty of Governments in the Preservation of Forests. And essentially, he's saying, hey guys, you know how the Mediterranean countries like Greece, like parts of the Middle East, cut down all their trees centuries ago? And now those areas are kind of dry and barren and struggling. Yeah, well, we're doing that here, like right now. And the government needs to step in before it's too late. The scientists in the room were like, huh, shit. And then they actually formed a committee on the spot to take this to Congress. 3 years later, which is fast for Congress, honestly, they approved $2,000 to fund a federal forestry agent position, and Franklin Huff got the job. August 30th, 1876, he became the first federal expert on forestry in U.S. history. He is sometimes called the father of American forestry. Gifford Pinchot, who we'll get to in a second, called him perhaps the chief pioneer in forestry in the United States. And then, because nothing good can just exist without drama, in 1883, the Commissioner of Agriculture replaced him, not because of his work, which was excellent, but because the commissioner personally disliked him. They were both doctors. Apparently, there was some professional animosity there, and Franklin got demoted back to forestry agent. He then died 2 years later. And honestly, history loves to do that, doesn't it? The person who started the whole thing kind of gets pushed aside, someone else takes credit, and then we barely know their name. Ugh, men and women dominated fields, am I right? Okay, so Franklin's office gets expanded into the Division of Forestry in 1881. Then in 1891, Congress passes the Forest Reserve Act, which lets the president set aside public lands as forest reserves. Then in 1901, it gets renamed the Bureau of Forestry, and then in 1905, everything changes. The Transfer Act of 1905 moves forest management from the Department of the Interior to the Bureau of Forestry, and the Bureau becomes the U.S. Forest Service. Clap, 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 yay, official, done. And the guy at the helm of that transition? Gifford Pinchot. So let's talk about Gifford, because Gifford is that bitch. Like, if he were alive today, he would probably be on every podcast or have his own. He would for sure have his own newsletter. He would be insufferable, but absolutely interesting. So Gifford was born in 1865 into a wealthy Connecticut family. His grandfather had made the family fortune by basically clear cutting forests, logging, wallpaper pulp, the whole thing. And Gifford's father looked at what his own family had done to the land and felt genuinely terrible about it. So he encouraged Gifford to become a forester, which at the time was like saying, I want to be a professional YouTuber, or I want to have a podcast. The career barely existed in the United States at the time. So Gifford goes to Yale, graduates, and then goes back to France to study forestry because there literally isn't a forestry school in America yet. He comes back. He's the only American with professional forestry training, and he immediately starts putting it to use. He gets hired to manage the forests on George Vanderbilt's estate in Asheville, North Carolina, the Biltmore Estate, and writes the first scientific forest management plan in the country. This is a man who is extremely aware that he is the first to do everything, and he loves it. But here's where it gets better. So Gifford meets Theodore Roosevelt. You know him. They become close, like camping trips together. Teddy calls him his closest advisor, that kind of close. Roosevelt becomes president in 1901, and Pinchot is basically in his ear constantly about conservation. Together, they more than tripled the nation's forest reserves. They actually coined the term conservation, as in the movement, together. When the Forest Service was officially established in 1905, Pinchot was the obvious choice for the first chief, and under him and Roosevelt, the agency went from managing 60 forest reserves totaling 56 million acres to the massive system that we know today, 154 national forests and 193 million acres. Talk about wow, you know? And then Roosevelt's term ended. Taft came in, he kept Pinchot on, but things got tense. There was a scandal, an Alaskan coal scandal of all things, where the Interior Secretary was accused of letting private interests exploit protected land. Pinchot said, no, 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 no. He thought it was corrupt, and, he let everyone know. He said so publicly, loudly, over and over again for months. So Taft fired him in January of 1910. And here's the wild part. Firing Gifford drove such a wedge between Taft and Teddy that Roosevelt came back, formed the Bull Moose Party, split the Republican vote, and handed the presidency to Woodrow Wilson, a Democrat. All of that because someone fired the forestry guy. Gifford later became the governor of Pennsylvania twice. He's kind of iconic. But also, and I think it's worth noting, this is not the first time the Forest Service's leadership has been a political casualty, and we're seeing that pattern right now. So let's talk about what we're actually dealing with, okay? The U.S. Forest Service manages 193 million acres. That's 154 national forests and 20 national grasslands across 43 states, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands. To give you a sense of scale, that is roughly the size of Texas and California combined. It's about a quarter of all federal land in the United States. What does that include? 143,000 miles of trails, 374,000 miles of roads, over 14,000 recreation sites, campgrounds, wilderness areas, ski resorts on public land, watershed protection. The Forest Service is why a lot of cities have clean drinking water, by the way, because national forests protect watersheds upstream. And they have 77 research stations doing things like studying tree diseases, climate change impacts, carbon storage, fire behavior, actual science that other countries reference. The motto is caring for the land and serving people, and their mission is to sustain the health, diversity, and productivity of the nation's forests and grasslands to meet the needs of present and future generations. That last part, future generations, is kind of the whole point. The Forest Service exists to make decisions not just for right now, but for 50, 100 years from now and beyond. So who should care? Everyone, right? And I want to break this down because I really want you to understand why this isn't just like a granola person issue. If you like to go outside at all, camping, hiking, fishing, hunting, skiing, off-roading, birdwatching, dirt biking, a massive amount of that happens on Forest Service land. 150 million people visit national forests every year. So that's not just a niche group. If you care about your water, about 180 million Americans get their drinking water from watersheds that start in national forests. That includes huge cities. When forests burn and aren't maintained, that water quality goes down. And that is not hypothetical, that is very well documented. If you care about money, here's where I want to talk to the business people in the room. The outdoor recreation economy generates $1.3 trillion in the US. Trillion with a T. That's 2.4% of GDP. It employs 5.2 million people. For context, that is bigger than agriculture, bigger than mining, bigger than the pharmaceutical industry, and a lot of that economic activity happens on or near Forest Service land. A coalition of 70 companies, including REI, the North Face, Columbia Sportswear, Patagonia, and a bunch more, have all come out against the current restructuring. They estimate that recreation on Forest Service land alone drives $23.3 billion in economic output every year. If the agency can't do its job, that number's going to shrink. And the towns and the small businesses that depend on forest visitors, they're the ones to feel it first. Also, if you're a hunter or a fisher, the Forest Service manages habitat. When the agency can't do forest health work, habitat quality goes down. Populations of species that you hunt and fish change, decrease, go away altogether. This is a land management issue, not just an environmental one. Also, if you're a logger or if you work in timber, the Forest Service manages timber sales. So in 2025, they sold 2.94 billion board feet of timber, and they are actually trying to increase that. They have a stated goal of growing timber volume by 25% by 2028. Timber jobs depend on a functional Forest Service. And lastly, if you've ever lived through a wildfire or near one, or anyone that you love has experienced a wildfire, I really want you to hear me out on this one. So, the Forest Service is one of the primary federal agencies responsible for wildfire management, prevention, mitigation, suppression. This includes things like prescribed burns, clearing brush, managing fire breaks, work that happens before a fire even starts. And that literally determines how bad a fire gets when it does start. Remember the January 2025 Los Angeles wildfires? Those were devastating, right? Catastrophic. And coming right off the heels of that, the Trump administration cut thousands of probationary Forest Service employees. And here's the thing, probationary in government doesn't mean new. It means you're in a new position. Many of these employees had years of experience with the agency. They were ecologists, field rangers, biologists. One ecologist in Oregon was literally collecting plant data that feeds into wildfire behavior models, helping firefighters understand how a fire will move through a landscape. Gone. A field ranger in Central Oregon described her job as being the eyes on the woods. So she was someone who patches out abandoned campfires before they turn into disasters. She's gone. A nonprofit called Grassroots Wildland Firefighters analyzed the impact and found that the Forest Service completed 38% less wildfire mitigation work under the Trump administration last year compared to previous seasons. The agency also completed 22% fewer miles of trail maintenance, which is the lowest amount in 15 years, according to an internal Forest Service report. What's funny is the administration said that the cuts wouldn't affect fire response, but then later, all hush hush, they admitted that they had actually let go hundreds of red card holders, so employees who are certified to work on wildfires. They later had to ask those employees to come back before the fire season. And now, entering this fire season, the agency is so short staffed that they had to get special permission from the Office of Personnel Management to let temporary seasonal firefighters work more hours. That's crazy. That's scrambling, right? We are headed into a fire season that is expected to be downright fucked. Dry conditions, low snowpack across the West, all while simultaneously doing a major organizational restructuring. One retired Forest Service supervisor who spent 35 years with the agency, including 15 running the White River National Forest in Colorado, which is the most visited national forest in the country, said he has no trust that this is being done with noble intent. So, back to the news. The headquarters is moving from DC to Salt Lake City. On the surface, the argument makes sense. Most national forests are in the West, so why not be closer to them? Blah, blah, blah. Utah Governor Spencer Cox, a Republican, he supports it. Colorado Governor Jared Polis, a Democrat, he supports it. Yay, bipartisan, right? But here's the thing that critics keep pointing out, and I think it's worth noting. Salt Lake City is also the home base of Utah's congressional delegation, which has been one of the most aggressive in pushing for public land sales. Utah has been trying to get control of federal lands within its borders for decades. One analyst put it this way: this move is part of a progression. big staff cuts in February of 2025, then buyouts and retirements, then a proposed 60% budget cut, and now moving leadership to a state whose politicians have been leading the charge on public land transfers. I mean, whether or not that's the intent, that's the pattern. And then there's the research station closures. Like I said, 57 of 77 research facilities are being shut down across 31 states. The Pacific Northwest alone loses 3. These are the facilities doing climate research, fire behavior research, species studies. Patagonia said it quite plainly. They said by shutting down its research stations, culling its staff, and moving the headquarters to Salt Lake City, it will be surprising if USFS can effectively manage anything at all. Boom. The National Federation of Federal Employees, which represents tens of thousands of Forest Service workers, called it reckless disruption and chaos. And now I want to pause, shed light for a second, and be real with you because I don't want to come across like this is some sort of one-sided love letter to a government agency. The Forest Service is not perfect. It's a 120-year-old bureaucracy that has absolutely had its issues. There have been long-running debates about grazing, logging, mining, and recreation all happening on the same land and not always getting along. In the late 1990s, the spotted owl became the center of one of the most contentious land management fights in American history. Protecting old-growth forest for the owl's habitat meant reducing logging, and that hit timber communities hard. I mean, there are people on both sides of those arguments, right? There was a controversy in the late 1980s where the agency illegally provided surplus military aircraft to private contractors for use as wildfire air tankers. I mean, that's not really great if it's illegal, right? The history of road building in national forests is its own saga as well. Clinton ordered a moratorium on the roads to assess environmental impact. Bush rolled it back. It's been contested ever since, blah, blah, blah. And in 2020, a woman named Melody Staria Mobley, the first Black female forester ever hired by the Forest Service, came forward to share that she had been sexually assaulted by a colleague in the late 1970s and that the assault was largely ignored when she reported it and her attacker was never punished. That's a real failure, and I do believe that it's important to call it out. The Forest Service, like any institution, has things that it needs to reckon with. The question, though, is whether we fix it from the inside or whether we just tear it down. And this is a side note, but I have to tell you something that's kind of specific to me. If you have a collie, it'll be specific to you too. So I have a dog. His name is Holden. He is a rough collie shepherd mix. And everywhere I go, literally anywhere and everywhere, someone will call him Lassie every single time. I can't take him anywhere without it happening. Oh, Lassie, you don't see collies much anymore. And like, I get it. He's beautiful. So when I was researching this episode and I found out that Lassie, the actual Lassie, the TV show, has a formal documented connection to the U.S. Forest Service, I almost fell out of my damn chair. So in the 1960s, the Lassie TV show had storylines where Lassie and various forest rangers went on adventures together on Forest Service land. And this wasn't just background scenery. No. The show actively promoted conservation, responsible land use, environmental awareness. It was inadvertently one of the most effective public relations campaigns the Forest Service ever had. The show and its star received awards and citations from the U.S. Senate and the Department of Agriculture, and there is actually a piece of legislation signed by President Lyndon B. Johnson in early 1968 that is informally called the Lassie Program. It dealt with soil and water pollution prevention and was partly attributed to the public awareness the show had built. Like how cool. A rough collie helped pass environmental legislation. I'm just so proud. I'm going to tell Holden that Lassie was his great, great, great times 20 grandma. Okay, so we've done the history, we've done the drama, we've done the stakes. Let's talk about what you can actually do. First, obviously, get informed. Not from me, not from a partisan news source, but from primary sources. So the Forest Service's own website is fs.usda.gov, and they have a forestry facts page worth bookmarking. Read what they say they're doing, then read what critics are saying, and then make up your own mind, okay? And if you decide that you want to do something, you can start off, you can volunteer. So this is actually really accessible. Local Forest Service offices take volunteers for trail maintenance, invasive species removal, campground hosting, visitor centers, all that fun stuff. So if you live near a national forest, your local ranger district likely has a specific list of needs right now. So give them a call, like actually call them up. It takes 5 minutes and they will be genuinely grateful, or stop by. I mean, you don't have to call if you want to go and stop by. That's great too. There's also a program called Passport in Time. So that is archaeology and historic preservation work on Forest Service land. So if that sounds interesting to you, look it up, check it out. Another option, you can donate. So the National Forest Foundation is the nonprofit partner of the Forest Service, and they do direct on the ground work. They do trail maintenance, reforestation, restoration. Their website is nationalforest.org. The Forest Service also has a plant a tree program at plantatree.fs.usda.gov if you want something more tangible. And most importantly, especially with all these cuts, recreate responsibly, okay? This is free to do. Leave no trace. If you haven't heard of it, it's a set of principles for being in nature in a way that doesn't trash it. Pack out your trash. Stay on trails when you're supposed to. Don't feed animals. Don't build fires in fire restricted areas. Don't be that person who leaves a fire going when they leave camp. Remember, don't be a Terry. It sounds basic, but the cumulative impact of everyone doing it or not doing it is massive. It reduces the burden on volunteer crews and it makes the forest more enjoyable for everyone, literally. So it's genuinely a win win. Lastly, you can engage locally. So contact your representatives, which I know. Contact your representatives. I hate it. I hate that. But staffing decisions at the Forest Service are connected to appropriations, which are decided by Congress. The Interior, Environment, and Related Agencies Subcommittee is specifically the one that controls the Forest Service budget. So if you live in a district with a member of that committee, that call or that email or that letter, whatever you do, it actually matters more than you think. And super lastly, I guess, follow along. Okay. So keep paying attention to this story, keep paying attention to the state forests, the restructuring that is happening right now. It's happening in phases. And we'll know more in the coming months about it actually looks like on the ground. But until then, I mean, just stay informed. Okay, guys, that was a lot. I know, but you made it. I made it. I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of me. I want to leave you with this. The Forest Service's motto is caring for the land and serving people. That was true in 1905 when Gifford Pinchot said it, and it should still be true now. The question is whether or not we let it be. As always, if you enjoyed this episode, please share it. Tag me at indistinct.pod or at Eliza Hollister on Instagram. You know, if you want to talk about it, if you want to send me articles, leave a review if you're on Apple Podcasts, rate it if you're on Spotify, leave a comment wherever you're listening. It genuinely helps my little pod reach more people. I will put all the resources that I talked about in the show notes, the Forest Service website, the National Forest Foundation, the Plant a Tree program, all of it. And we will chat next week. Love ya. Love you. Bye.